This is an LA Times Studios podcast.
Hello and welcome to LA Crimes. I'm your host, Madison McGhee, and today I'm joined by LA Times reporter Clara Harter, and I am so excited to have her here. Thank you so much
for joining me. Thank you for having me. I'm also very excited to be here.
It's going to be great. There's so much to talk about with you, but we have a really interesting story today that we're going to talk about, which is inmate homicide and crime within prison and, the greater crime going on just behind bars. So thanks for joining me to talk about what you've been covering.
Yeah, it's a pretty alarming problem, and I feel like the public maybe doesn't pay the most attention because maybe they don't care the most about people behind bars, but it's a pretty awful situation, and this year has been especially bloody. California has long had some of the higher rates of inmate homicides, but this year, in the first 4 months, we had 13 suspected homicides. That puts us way on track to surpass the total of 24 homicides reported last year.
Wow. So, Clara, I think you are by a lot the youngest reporter we've had on the show. And your career is already just so impressive, and I am in awe of what you've accomplished so far. But I want to kind of talk to you about sort of the origin of your career and your interest in journalism. Where did it all begin for you?
I always wanted to be a journalist. And then I went to college, and then I was told that you'll make no money and you'll get laid off and you'll never have a job. So I was like, oh, crap, I guess I won't do that. And then I tried to go into politics, and I was really interested in making a difference and fighting the good fight. Then I learned that politics was very corrupt, and it's very hard to do that. So I circled all the way back to my childhood dream of journalism because I do believe, and I've seen, that you can create a lot of impact very quickly, calling out corruption, advocating for people whose needs are being ignored. And that felt like very fulfilling and exciting for me. So yeah, I kind of went wholeheartedly after it after college, and I've been so lucky that it has worked out so far, and knock on wood, it continues to do so.
Yeah, I love that. I've brought this up before in an episode, who knows when now, but to me, journalism used to be that sort of like public servant where you were calling out corruption or letting a town know that there were chemicals in their water, or like really exposing things that people needed to know and sort of doing this work to serve the public. And it sort of felt like it veered off a little bit with just like
sensationalism.
Yes. And the times and things just going on in the times of the world and what we're living in right now. And sort of the call out on journalists and people maybe not wanting to do that job anymore because of the backlash or whatever. And so it just has shifted a little bit. And the internet has also created a whole world of everyone's a journalist because you say anything online and now you're a reporter and you're reporting on something. But 100%. I think it's so honorable that even at such a young age, you sort of recognize you weren't really like, we weren't alive when journalism was really doing those things, but you still have this like draw to do that. And I think that's amazing. Okay. And you're at a place where people are doing that every day. So I just think that's really impressive. But why LA?
Great question. I graduated in the year of 2020, which was a fantastic year for all those who remember. And it was my senior spring, and they just told us to leave the dorms. And I talked to my family, and they're like, you could either move back in with parents, or my sister at the time was living in LA. And I said, oh, I picked that. Like, that just sounds so much better. And I thought it would just be for a couple of weeks till things calmed down. I was in New York at the time, but it was sticky and sunny and a wonderful place to live. And I was fortunate to get my first journalism job and been here ever since.
Wow. So you get your first job in journalism. And I mean, it's no surprise that the state of journalism is shifting. And I mean, we hear it like print media is dead and there's magazines that have transitioned to digital only. And a lot of stuff is just really pivoting. What's your take on what's going on in the media now? And how are you feeling about your career potential down the line with all of the shifts, and how are you sort of pivoting?
Definitely anxious, definitely a little alarmed, but also cautiously excited. It's really cool to see how many different forms of media, like podcasts, like videos, are being intertwined with traditional print reporting. And I think it's a great way to engage people. I mean, I love doing things like this. So I'm excited to, keep writing really good, powerful stories, but then create fun videos about them or podcasts and hook in younger readers. And I also use social media to my advantage. I found some great drama, some great tea lurking on TikTok that I've then DM'd people and unearthed the whole story that I wouldn't have found out about otherwise, or used it as a way to reach out to sources, especially young students. At all the UCLA protests last year, it was really useful. So yeah, it's definitely a little bleak sometimes to look at the state of the industry, but the evolution of it also poses exciting opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're in a great position because you understand both sides and you're able to utilize social media in a way that other people who are a little bit more stagnant in that thinking or not interested in trying to do are willing to do. And so I think that's great. Do you find that in the same way that sort of your age is an asset in those ways with social media, do you find that people don't take you seriously?
It's a good question. Not so much when I'm working at my desk because, I'm sending out my little LA Times emails or I'm getting on the phone and people don't really know my age. I have been reporting in person on school campuses and people will maybe think I'm a student. And I'm like, actually, no, I'm important. You need to answer my questions. But typically that hasn't been a big problem.
Yeah, no, that's
Take
great.
it till you make it.
So let's transition now into a segment that I like to call the gateway case. When you were first reporting, do you remember what the very first case you ever covered was, or the case that really made you think, like, this is exactly what I want to be doing?
Wow. I would say the project I'm most proud of is I did an in-depth report on fentanyl addiction in MacArthur Park. And I was able to spend a couple months hanging around that area and getting to know people who are using the drug and struggling with the intense addiction of the drug and this whole kind of underground crime world that existed there to help people make money to buy the drug. And I also found out that the city was pretty aware of what was going on there, but because it was tucked away in a low-income neighborhood, a lot of the residents there aren't voters and aren't citizens. And the city was really ignoring it. And it was such a terrible, terrible problem. And I started writing about it a lot. And I've noticed that there was a big shift in police attention and city attention and resources coming in. It was the first time I felt like I was achieving that goal of that impact that I wanted to get into journalism for. So it was a really pivotal moment in my career. And came along at a time when I was like, oh, God, I'm getting paid nothing. This is horrible. And then it just reaffirmed my faith. And yeah, it was
that's really incredible. And what happened after that? How long were you covering that? And then where does that story lead you to after?
Yeah, I was covering that for about 6 months. And then this was before I was at the LA Times, and the LA Times started covering it. And Steve Lopez, who's an amazing writer, has written a lot about the problems in the neighborhood, kept the pressure up. And then the mayor has been taking a lot of action now, and that's been great to see. And I think it was about 1.5 years after that came out that I started working at the Times myself.
Was that like a dream job?
Oh my gosh, yes. Like biggest dream ever. I got the phone call that I actually got the job and I just started crying, and then I had to like put on my big girl voice and be like, thank you so much. Appreciate the opportunity. Won't let you down. But absolutely. I mean, it's the paper of record in Los Angeles. I love this city so much. I admire so many of the reporters here that just produce such incredible work. So just thankful every day that I get to be here.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, what happens? I'm so curious, just my own personal curiosity. What happens when you get your dream job at 26? Where do you go from there? What's the new dream? What do you do when you're so successful at 26?
You're very sweet. I feel like there's so much room to grow here. I'm on the breaking news team. I'm also on the night shift. So maybe one day get off the night shift. It's a small dream. Specialize. I'd love to do more investigations, work in politics, but also, like you mentioned, maybe new forms of media, whether that is a more show version of news reporting or whatever people are going to be reading and consuming as news in the future. I'd be interested in. Yeah, career maybe outside of traditional print news, but
totally. I mean, I think you're perfectly positioned to do any of those things. So that's very exciting. Clara and I will be back in a minute to talk about the uptick in inmate deaths in Los Angeles. But before that, a quick break. You know when a shirt just becomes your go-to? That's what happened when I picked up a few new pieces from Quint's. They're the first things I reach for in my closet. Lightweight, comfortable, and always on point. Quint's has all the things you actually want to wear. like organic cotton silk polos, European linen beach shorts, and comfortable pants that work for everything from backyard hangs to nice dinners. The best part? Everything with Quints is priced 50 to 80% less than what you'd find at similar brands. By working directly with top artisans and cutting out the middlemen, Quints gives you luxury pieces without the crazy markups. Elevate your closet with Quints. Go to quince.com/LAcrimes for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/LAcrimes to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/LAcrimes. Welcome back to LA Crimes. I'm joined today by Los Angeles Times reporter Clara Harter, and we're going to be doing something a little bit different today. Normally, we talk about one specific crime and do a deep dive into that, but we're really going to be talking about a more systemic problem going on right now where there's been multiple inmate deaths in California prisons, and talking a little bit about that and all of the issues there from negligence to these homicides. So, Clara, where did this all begin, at least for you, when you first started covering this story?
Yeah, I'm on our breaking news team. I cover a lot of crime stories. And one night I spotted a press release about a suspected inmate homicide. And I had a total deja vu feeling because I thought I had just seen another press release about inmate homicide. So I went to the press release section and I saw that there had been 13 suspected inmate homicides in California prisons in the first 4 months of 2025, which is very alarming. That is a particularly bloody year. California is often high up on these homicides lists, but this is much more than was reported last year, which was 24 total compared to 13 in 4 months.
So what do you think is sort of the catalyst for this issue? Like, where does this all begin? How are they getting away with it? Like, what's happening inside of the prisons?
I think there's a couple big factors as to why California has especially high rates of inmate homicides. One of them that people point to is the high concentration of gangs inside our prison system. These gangs reportedly will greenlight inmates for killings, and a lot of violence goes on that way. And then another key reason, and this is really reflected in the data of who's actually committing these attacks, is California has a really high concentration of people serving life sentences or third strike offenses. So they feel like they have nothing to lose. There was an interview with one person who killed another inmate, and he told psychologists in prison that that killing was, quote, a freebie because he was already serving life.
Wow. And that leads me to this question. I recently spoke with a former FBI agent, in regards to my dad's case. And something that was happening a lot within the county that I'm investigating for my dad's murder is drug dealers killing other drug dealers. And this FBI agent said that they have a word for that, and it's misdemeanor murder, where it's just sort of like, whatever, what are we going to do about it? They're criminals killing criminals. And do you find that that's sort of how these homicides are being treated within the prison system?
Honestly, personally, yes. It does seem like there is a lack of willpower or perhaps external pressure to stop this violence. There was a crackdown at 11 high-security prisons in March, early in March, at which point 7 people had already been killed. And they restricted privileges like cell phone rights and visitation hours, but it didn't appear to do anything to stem the tide of this bloodshed. There were 3 more people killed during that period, then those restrictions expired, and several more people have been killed since.
And what exactly is happening with these homicides? Like, can you walk through, like, how people are getting killed behind bars?
Yeah, it's mostly with improvised weapons, shanks, like people will sharpen things. It's a lot of stabbing attacks. It happens in cells. People attack their cellmates. And then it also often is reported in prison yards.
So there's 4 different categories of death that these are sort of filed under, which is natural, accident, suicide, or homicide. How accurate do you think these categorizations are, or do you think negligence plays a role in any of them?
I feel like the homicide bucket is pretty accurate because there's often blood, to be blunt, and, it's not like – it's hard to make a homicide death look like a natural death. I think where the line gets blurrier is when you are looking at deaths that are ruled an accident, and they could be because of negligent conditions, or oftentimes they're ruled natural, but perhaps someone wasn't receiving adequate health care for a condition that they had.
Yeah, so when this is happening, I mean, I'm imagining, I've only seen movies, of course, or toured an old prison somewhere, but if you're shanking your cellmate, I mean, there's someone potentially in the cell across from you, there's guards everywhere. How is this happening? And it's just people are sort of not getting away with it. Obviously, they're already behind bars, but getting away with it to the point where they're able to do it and someone dies.
I think, to be honest, it just happens so quickly, and prison guards can't have their eyes on all corners of the prison at all times, especially if it happens within a cell, you know, late at night or if there's a physical fight. And it seems like there is a plethora. There's a lot of homemade weapons in prison. When I mentioned that crackdown, that 3-week crackdown that happened in March, the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation confiscated 166 improvised weapons. So people are getting their hands on them, whether it's smuggling them in or they're making them. And then it can only take a matter of seconds to deliver a fatal wound.
Does it feel like, from what you've noticed while you're investigating this, like that it would be obvious, like, oh, these two people don't get along and they're just not getting moved or separated, and then it leads to death?
Absolutely. I think it is crazy that people who have been convicted in jail already of attacking an inmate or killing an inmate continue to be housed with other inmates. There was one person who is the suspected attacker in 2 inmate homicides this year. And it is frequently these people serving life sentences who then continue to go on and inflict more violence in prison. And as far as I'm aware, they're just still housed under the same standard high security protocols.
Why do you think there's been this uptick in homicides this year specifically?
That's what is so puzzling to me and what I need to continue digging into, because I haven't been able to pinpoint a factor in the California prison system that has shifted significantly from last year compared to this year. I don't know whether there are things going on with prison gangs internally or just a greater sense that you can get away with this, or that conditions for you won't change if you're already serving life. But I'm curious to know if prison officials are investigating it. I know there's been people questioning whether there's understaffing and inadequate security, whether that's contributing to the confidence of inmates in getting away with these attacks.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think about, I mean, right now I'm thinking a lot about the Menendez case where they were resentenced. And for someone to think that, oh, I'm here for life, I can get away with anything, it doesn't matter. You know, even the possibility that, well, maybe I could get resentenced or something could happen, that they would still want to be on their best behavior just in case. But I guess
I feel like the Menendez case is such an exception. It is so rare for people to get resentenced. And that was really their celebrity kind of clout and mass public interest in the case. I think a lot of these people who are serving life sentences come from really tough lives, and they can't imagine, a different possibility.
Do they have like visitors? Do they have family coming to see them? Like what's the background on these prisoners?
I don't know about how much they're visited, but I do know that they are largely sentenced to prison for very violent crimes, whether that was domestic abuse or attempted murder. Typically the pattern when I've been looking at them case by case is you have these violent initial charges, and then they continue to rack up violent offense charges in prison. And then once they hit the point of a life sentence, those additional charges continue to happen. People feel like they can act with impunity almost.
Yeah, wow. After the break, Clara and I will talk about what can be done to improve the future for inmates in our prisons. Welcome back to LA Crimes. I'm joined by LA Times reporter Clara Harter, who has been covering the inmate homicide situation going on in California prisons. Now, can you tell me a little bit about any initiatives being done to stop this trend from going up and up this year?
To be honest, I haven't heard any cohesive plan as to how they're going to tamp down on this. As I mentioned, there was that revoking of privileges for inmates for a short period of time, but that didn't seem to impact the number of deaths. Personally, when I'm looking at this, I think some sort of policy change around housing for people who have already been convicted of violence on inmates. I don't understand why these people still have cellmates, because sometimes their cellmates will end up dead and they've already attacked or killed another inmate previously.
How, when you're writing about inmate homicides, do you write with a sense of urgency that would like get people to care?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, no one deserves to die behind bars. I mean, yes, there's the death sentence, but for the most part, these are cold-blooded killings, and it seems like there's a lot of inaction and lack of will to prevent it from happening. And I think what's alarming to me as a reporter is, if they're sort of turning their back on this, what else are they turning their back on in prisons? What other abuses and attacks and horrible treatment of inmates on other inmates is taking place under prison guards' noses that we, the public, aren't finding out about? And if we have fostered a place where people feel like they can kill with impunity, what other acts of violence do they feel like they're at liberty to take out? And that does give me pause. Our prison system has been plagued with a lot of issues. I mean, there was the horrible women's prison that got shut down. It was nicknamed the Rape Club because of the amount of sexual abuse that went on there. And that just happened very, very recently. So I think we like to think of California as a very liberal state, but our prison system is definitely home to a lot of atrocities. And it's hard to report on them because you can't get in there. It's hard to get in contact with inmates. But I think it's important that we keep doing this work because even though people have been convicted of crimes, they're still people. They're still someone's son or daughter. And yeah, it's a dark world.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine being the relative of an inmate and getting the call that like your relative has been murdered.
Yeah.
Behind bars. I mean, it's just...
And, feeling like there's no justice for that, because if they were murdered by someone who already is serving a life sentence, can feel like there are no consequences.
Yeah, so when this happens, there is no trial, there is no...
There still is. They get charges filed and pressed against them, so they might get, if it was just an assault or an attack, they might get another 5 years added to their sentence, but it's kind of meaningless if they're already serving life.
Right. But do they show up in court and that's all documented the same way that it would be for anything
added
else?
onto their record?
Yeah. Wow. So my last question is, are there people who are targeted more for these killings than others?
Yeah. I think definitely being a celebrity can put a target on your back. Gang affiliations can do the same. But the biggest trend that I've seen in this data is that sex offenders are attacked at really high rates, especially if they've committed crimes on children. There is a distinct hatred within the inmate population for these particular inmates. And in certain parts of America and at certain times, they're actually housed separately because of how dangerous and how high the rates of attacks on sexual predators are.
Wow. I mean, it's so dark, but you are great and you're doing incredible work. And I just am so impressed. But I think that's all we have for today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for being here.
Bearing with me. I know it is. It's a heavy subject, but it's important to talk about.
Yeah, it's super important. I mean, I come from a story where it's a case no one wanted to talk about. And it's a person and a career path my dad lived that no one cared if he was murdered. And so I think it's important to talk about these things and shed light on them and bring a level of empathy and care that you're bringing to these stories. So I think it's great. And that's it for LA Crimes. If you like the show, please rate and subscribe, and I'll see you next week.